So Mali is a country in West Africa in the Sahel, and it is one of a number of African countries that has sort of sought closer ties with the Kremlin, has sort of pivoted away from the West. Most recently, sort of banning French as a national language, its former French colony, and in fact, sort of seeking support from President Putin. So Wagner mercenaries have really sort of helped the military leadership to sort of stay in power and crush sort of jihadist rebels in the area. And in fact, the Malian president, even this week, has been in St. Petersburg attending this African summit that President Putin has been hosting.
Defence officials have accidentally sent emails containing classified information to Mali, an African country with close links to Russia. The mistake was supposedly made because of a typing error. Well, George Grylls is the Times' defence correspondent who has the story, and he joins us now. Afternoon, George.
Afternoon, Kate.
Now, what kind of typing error are we talking about here? Because it seems like a really big mistake to make.
Well, it really is a sort of human error that you or I could easily make, but obviously with quite grave consequences when it comes from someone working at the MOD. So the Pentagon, the US military, uses the domain name .mil, whereas Mali, the country, uses the domain name .ml. So you could see that a minor slippage, leaving out an I, can result in an email that is intended to go to sort of allies in the US, ending up in West Africa, in a country that is in fact a close ally of President Putin.
And how many emails did Mali receive?
So we know for certain there's a sort of some examples that were collected since January this year. So we know for certain from the UK there were at least 5 in that period. The MOD is now investigating to see how many might have been sent over about a 10-year period.
Over 10 years. Sorry, over a 10-year period this has been happening.
That's right. So the domain name was managed by this Dutch entrepreneur, and he was the one who was sort of collecting these emails. He had warned the Pentagon for a long time that he was getting these emails because of people making typos. But he decided to raise the alarm one final time, having sort of been knocking on the door of the Pentagon for 10 years, because he handed over the contracts at the beginning of this week. So from now on, Mali has entire control of whatever emails it receives.
And do we know what these emails contained? I mean, I think most of them were trivial, but some of them did contain some fairly specific info.
That's right. I mean, the vast majority, not that interesting, when employees are going off on holiday, dates of annual leave. But, among those, some of the emails seen by the Times show that, it revealed the names of personnel working on very sensitive programs. So, for example, the names of scientific researchers at Porton Down, looking at hypersonic missiles, which is just about the most sensitive cutting-edge technology that's in development across the West today.
Yeah, which is fairly worrying. And just for people who are listening to this and wondering, well, why does it really matter? Explain what Mali's situation is here and what is concerning about them getting that kind of information.
So Mali is a country in West Africa in the Sahel, and it is one of a number of African countries that has sort of sought closer ties with the Kremlin, has sort of pivoted away from the West, most recently sort of banning French as a national language, its former French colony, and in fact sort of seeking support from President Putin. So Wagner mercenaries have really sort of helped the military leadership to sort of stay in power and crush sort of jihadist rebels in the area. And in fact, the Malian president, even this week, has been in St. Petersburg attending this African summit that President Putin has been hosting.
While we're talking about Putin and we've got you here, let's just talk briefly about that situation in Ukraine, because Kyiv's counteroffensive is underway and it has been compared to the Normandy landings during World War II. What is the latest situation there?
Well, we've seen it looked like a bit of increased activity earlier this week when the Ukrainians were pushing south from a place called Orikhiv. The Ukrainians' aim is basically to push all the way to the Black Sea, and if they can sort of split the Russian forces in two, then they have a good chance of sort of maybe eventually pushing them out. But they're coming up against very formidable Russian defences, trenches, minefields, you name it. While at the moment the progress is more in sort of hundreds of meters rather than the tens of kilometers that they might hope. These minefields are basically presenting a real challenge for the Ukrainians to get through.
Yeah, and of course, the more of a challenge that is, the more they potentially lose some of those heavy armoured vehicles, which are so important. George Grylls, thank you. George Grylls, the defence correspondent for The Times.